She's not playing games with you. She's running a background check, and you're failing it without even knowing the test exists. In the first 3 weeks of dating someone, most women run a quiet series of evaluations so subtle you'll never spot them happening. And how you respond to those moments, the ones that feel completely random, is quietly deciding whether this goes anywhere at all. If you've ever felt like a woman pulled back for no reason, got quieter after a small disagreement, or seemed to be watching you in a way you couldn't quite name, you weren't imagining it. You were inside a quiet testing phase, and almost nobody talks about what's actually happening underneath it. This isn't about manipulation, it's not a game, and it's rarely even conscious. Most women aren't deciding to test you the way you'd decide to study for an exam. It's closer to instinct, a nervous system doing its job, scanning for one specific answer to one specific question. Is it safe to lower my guard around this person? Here's what most dating advice gets completely wrong. It treats these moments like tricks to be passed, as if there's a script you can memorize. But the truth is something far more interesting, and honestly, far more useful. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what these quiet tests actually look like, why they show up specifically in the first 3 weeks and not later, and what your reactions in those small, unnoticed moments are really communicating about you, often more loudly than anything you actually say. Because the version of you she's evaluating isn't the version performing on a date. It's the version that shows up when nothing seems to be on the line. Picture this. 2 weeks into dating someone, plans change last minute. Nothing dramatic. A dinner reservation falls through, a friend cancels on her, something small, and in that moment, almost without realizing it, she's not just experiencing the inconvenience, she's watching you. How do you react when something doesn't go your way? Do you get tense? Sarcastic? Subtly irritated? Or do you stay steady? She'll likely never mention what she noticed. But she noticed everything. This is where it gets uncomfortable. These aren't tests in the sense of a checklist. They're more like emotional weather readings, taken in real time, almost entirely below conscious awareness. And they're happening not because she doesn't trust you specifically, but because trust, biologically and psychologically, has never been something humans extend freely on word alone. It has to be demonstrated, in small moments, repeatedly, before the nervous system agrees to relax. Here's the layer underneath that. A lot of these quiet evaluations cluster around very specific themes, and they're not random. She's often watching how you handle frustration, not because she expects perfection, but because a person's reaction to minor inconvenience is one of the fastest, most honest windows into how they'll handle real conflict later. She's watching what happens when she shares something a little vulnerable, even something small, like admitting she had a rough day. Do you brush past it to keep the mood light? Or do you actually slow down and meet her there? She's watching how you talk about people who aren't in the room. An ex, a coworker, a friend who frustrated you. Because the way you describe people who's hurt you is a surprisingly accurate preview of how you'll eventually describe her, if things ever go wrong between you. But that's only half the story. Because underneath all of this is something even more interesting. Most of these test-like moments aren't actually about you at all. They're about her own history. If she's been hurt before by someone who seemed calm and turned out to be anything but, her nervous system isn't testing you because of something you did. It's testing you because of something that already happened to her in a completely different relationship with a completely different person. You just happen to be standing in the spot where the test gets run. And here's where it gets even more uncomfortable for a lot of men to hear. Trying to perform your way through these moments almost always backfires. Because the moments that matter most are never the ones where you knew you were being watched. They're the ones where you genuinely forgot you were. Here's the deeper truth this entire video has been building toward. Quiet testing phase isn't really about evaluating you. It's about her nervous system trying to predict you. Think of it like this. Imagine her nervous system as a translator, standing between her conscious mind and a foreign language she's desperate to understand. The language of whether you're actually safe. Words are easy to translate. Anyone can say the right thing. Behavior under mild pressure, the small, unscripted moments, those are much harder to fake convincingly, over and over again. So her nervous system isn't listening to your words, nearly as closely as it does. Patterns. Reading your patterns. This is why you can say all the right things on a date. Compliment her, ask thoughtful questions, plan something sweet, and still sense her holding back slightly. It's not that she doesn't believe you, it's that her system hasn't yet collected enough small, real-world data points to know if your calm words match your actual nervous system under pressure. This is also why so many men feel confused when a woman seems to pull back after things were going so well. It often isn't because something went wrong. It's because something small finally happened. A delay, a disagreement, an awkward moment, and she was simply watching how you'd handle it. If you handled it with steadiness, that's not a coincidence she'll consciously celebrate. It's a data point her nervous system quietly logs and moves on from. This is what's actually happening in the first 3 weeks. You're not auditioning for a role. You're slowly building a pattern that her nervous system is reading in real time. The same way you'd learn to trust that a bridge won't collapse. Not because someone told you it's safe, but because you watched it hold weight, over and over, under slightly different conditions. And here's the part that should genuinely change how you think about this. You don't need to engineer perfect reactions to every small moment. In fact, trying to control your reaction too tightly often reads as more unsettling than an honest, slightly imperfect one. What actually builds trust fastest isn't flawless composure. It's consistency between who you are when things are easy and who you are when something mildly inconveniences you. So if these moments are happening, whether you notice them or not, how do you actually navigate them well? Here's what matters most. First, stop trying to identify the test and start focusing on your baseline. The goal was never to spot the exact moment you're not is. That mindset makes you performative, and performance is precisely what reads as unsafe. Instead, focus on being someone whose reactions to small inconveniences are genuinely consistent, whether or not anyone's watching. That consistency is what her nervous system is actually scanning for. Second, treat small vulnerable moments as invitations, not interruptions. When she shares something minor but emotionally real, a rough day, an insecurity, a small worry, resist the urge to immediately fix it, joke it away, or redirect the conversation back to lighter ground. Slow down for 10 extra seconds. Reflect back what you heard before responding. That small pause communicates more safety than almost anything else you could say. Third, audit how you talk about people who aren't in the room. If you notice your stories about exes, coworkers, or friends always cast you as the reasonable one, and everyone else as the problem, that's worth examining. Not just because she's listening, but because it's often an accurate mirror of how you process conflict generally. Fourth, let mild frustration exist without performing calm or performing anger. The healthiest reaction to a small inconvenience usually isn't stoic silence or visible irritation. It's a brief, honest acknowledgement, something like, "That's annoying, but it's fine," followed by actually moving on. That honest middle ground reads as far more trustworthy than either extreme. Fifth, understand that you're allowed to fail a moment occasionally. One instance of frustration, one slightly off reaction, doesn't define the pattern. What she's actually tracking is your average across many small moments, not your performance in any single one. Perfection isn't the goal. Believable, repeated consistency is. Here's the empowering part of all of this. You were never actually being judged by some impossible, invisible standard. You were simply being observed the way every human observes another human before deciding to trust them, slowly, through small moments, accumulated over time. Once you understand that the quiet testing phase isn't a trap to escape, but a natural part of how trust gets built, you stop resenting it and start simply living in a way that holds up to it. She was never testing whether you were perfect. She was testing whether you were real. And real doesn't require a performance, just consistency. If this gave you a new way of understanding moments you brain lived through, but never quite had language for, tell me in the comments. What's one small moment early in dating that you think someone was quietly watching closely? Let's talk about it down there. And if you want more breakdowns like this one, on the psychology that actually drives early dating behavior. Subscribe, because there's a lot more of this we're going to unpack together.